I grew up in on a farm in Oldham County, when Oldham County, Kentucky was still a very rural area. Today it is more like a suburb of Louisville. But I come from a long line of family farmers, which was a real gift with the experiences I had on the farm. Now, some people would question that because we worked hard. You know, we were integral in making the farm successful work. I'm one of 8 children, and the farm probably could not have survived without us. My parents had a strong Catholic faith and believed in Catholic education, so we came in town to Catholic high schools. And so that's how I ended up at Sacred Heart Academy. In growing up, my dad was an only child, so we were the only grandchildren of one set of grandparents, and which we had a close relationship with. My mother was only one of 3 children, so I knew all 4 of my grandparents. So it was a very close-knit family group. There was a lot of us in terms of my siblings, but I didn't have lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, so it was just us. Grade school was St. Aloysius in Pee Wee Valley, which was 2 grades in a room. There were 9 in my class, and the school was a house. Very small. It was a time the parish was very small. I knew everybody in the parish. I knew where they lived. I knew who their children were. It was that was our community, was the parish. I got a good education there. I was taught by the Sisters of Mercy. The Mercy Sisters had a boarding school there also that became the parish school. So even though the school was very small, half of that small school were the boarders. So it was not a lot of parish children. It was not a very Catholic area at all. Rode the public school bus to the Catholic school. Oldham County was pretty much Protestant, and lots of churches. There were 5 churches in the city limits of Pee Wee Valley, whose population at that time was 780. And one of them was St. Aloysius, which was really kind of the center of downtown Pee Wee Valley. That was the closest Catholic high school. You know, it was Sacred Heart. Actually, my older sister went to Mercy because my older brothers went to St. X that was then on Broadway, and so was Mercy. So it was convenient for them to drop her off. But when the next girls came along, the boys were graduated, and Sacred Heart was the closest. So it wasn't any choice to go to Sacred Heart. It was like the only option. It was my first experience with Ursulines. But you know, I didn't make a lot of distinction between different congregations. You know, it was another experience with nuns. And it was just assumed that if you went to a Catholic school, you were being taught by nuns. So it was the norm. And of course, as any place, I liked some better than others. I did have a couple of lay teachers while I was at Sacred Heart, but not more than a couple. But I did get to know them well. But basically, I was a very quiet, shy person. And today, people have a hard time thinking that about me. But growing up, we were taught that the children were to be seen and not heard. And that's the way I was in school. You know, I was very quiet. I always did very well. Sometimes people marvel that I could come from this little tiny rural school and succeed at Sacred Heart, but I went from a class of 9 in the 8th grade to 177 my freshman year at Sacred Heart. So it was overwhelming. And I was socially immature because I didn't have the experience of most of my classmates. But it didn't take long to hook up with a few that were somewhat similar to me. And I have some lasting friends from high school that we still keep in contact with each other. So it's that part has been good. But the nuns at Sacred Heart were just like nuns. That's what they were supposed to be. They were the teachers. And I had I was the fifth of the 8 children. My older siblings graduated from high school, went to college, met their Prince Charming or the girl of their dreams, got married and had children, and that was my plan. You know, it's just, that was my plan, you know, do what my siblings did. And I didn't even think of anything different than that. The choice was what college, and was I going to be a nurse or a teacher or a secretary, whatever. And I had dated, so I mean, I assumed that I'd get married because that's what you did. That was the norm. But there was something nagging little voice inside of me that said something different. And I was determined not to pay any attention to that, because that was not, and I was, you know, quiet and shy. I didn't break the norm. I didn't do things differently. You know. But when I was a senior, because of transportation, I got to school very early. And the Sister Rosamond, who was the guidance counselor, asked me if I would help, because she saw me get there early, would help and do some filing and things in the guidance office, which I did. So when I applied for college, I asked her to write a recommendation for me. And she said, sure, I'd be happy to. But she said, I really think of you being someplace else next year. I knew right away what she was thinking about. She didn't say it, but I knew. And I can remember just leaving her office, just walking out. But that was the beginning of me beginning to think more seriously, or listening to that disturbing voice inside of me that was suggesting something different. But I resisted it. I had 4 other classmates that senior year that had already told everybody they were going to enter the convent. And so I knew who they were. None of them were in my immediate circles of friends, but they were in that next circle. I was in a lot of classes with them, because we were in classes according to academics, and so we were all in the top groups. And I was somewhat jealous that they knew what they wanted to do and could tell people, and I was in turmoil about making the decision. But finally, by probably a month before graduation, I decided I've got to do something about this. I still have a distinct memory of sitting in the back of church at St. Aloysius after going to confession on a Thursday night, Holy Hour night, and saying to God, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. And hearing God say, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And just spontaneously in my heart saying yes, and feeling such a relief that I knew this was right. This was right. Now I still have the challenge of telling my parents, which I didn't expect to be real smooth, and it wasn't. And I had the challenge of, I had already signed up to go to Marian College in Indianapolis and major in math. I love math. Math was a game. It was fun. And my parents had already made a non-refundable deposit on a dorm room, and no way could I let them lose that money. Now, I still remember it was $50 in 1964, but it was a lot of money for us. So I told my parents, you know, and they were like, I don't think they were shocked or surprised, but disappointed. Because they wanted their children to go to college. Neither one of my parents had, my dad didn't go to high school. My mom dropped out her sophomore year in high school to help support her family. So, you know, education was important to them for their children. And so they, you know, with it, so I said, you know, she said, well, you got to write to Marian College and tell them, that you're not coming. And I did, and I told them why, and they sent my $50 back. But they were Franciscan sisters and they understood, So I ended up not losing the $50. It took a while, probably 5 or 6 years in the convent before they really believed that I was happy, that this was okay for me. But it was a real strain on the family because, at that time we had visiting Sunday once a month, and I had a new niece or nephew every 4 months. And for them to get together for an hour to come visit me, by the time I said hello to everybody, it was time to say goodbye to everybody. And but they were very faithful in visiting, and even though it was very limited. But that's the way it was. That was I didn't I wasn't disappointed with that plan because that was what was required. I had no anticipation of going home except for funerals when I entered. That different parts of that changed early on. So after 3 or 4 years, I did get to go home for a few days. And then I was one of the first people in the community that could go to a wedding. I went to my sister's wedding, but we couldn't go to the reception. And ironically, my sister's husband had a sister who was also a nun. So both of us could go to the wedding. She could go to the reception, but I couldn't. It was a different community. So, different communities did things at different times. But, I think that deep down I just felt like this was God's call. God was what God wanted of me, and therefore that's the way it was. But it was an exciting time to be at the convent because it was Vatican II and things were changing. And I found out that even though personality-wise I was quiet and shy and routine and when I know it was expected, that all the changes in the church was just very exciting. And I realized that was part of me also. Just beginning, there was lots of conversation and reading about it, reading the documents of Vatican II, and trying to educate ourselves about Vatican II. But still very much, I grew up in the pre-Vatican II church, which was very strict and literal, bound by rules and laws. So I had the experience of both. So all throughout ministry, I could understand where people were coming from because it was part of my experience too. And the resistance to some of the changes that the church invited us to was normal because that was my experience also. 1 year postulant, and then it was the next stage was called investment, and that's when you got the habit. And I was a novice for 2 years. After the novice for 2 years, then you profess vows, temporary vows for 3 years. And then had the option of professing them again for 2 more years because you couldn't profess final vows after 5 years. However, midstream that changed. That after 3 years, I could profess final vows if I wanted to. I chose another year because in my mind, I thought it was going to be 5, and I wasn't ready to make that quick change to 3. So I renewed vows for 1 year and professed final vows after 4 years. So I was actually in the convent for 7 years before I professed final vows. And that was an easy decision in many ways. That was the next step. I knew I was going to do it. It wasn't a lot of questioning or discernment around it. At times, it was also a time when a lot of women in formation, novices and postulants, junior profess, decided to leave. I often wonder, what is wrong with me that I don't want to leave when everybody else does? Or what do they see that I don't see? That I felt like maybe I'm missing something, that I'm not seeing something, but I never really wanted to leave. And I was faithful to God, and God was faithful to me. So as a postulant, I went to college full time. As a first-year novice, the only college classes we took were theology. As a second-year novice, we went to college full-time. I became less sure that I wanted the degree to be in math. I loved it, but I wasn't enamored by it. I wasn't sure, but I was on that trajectory, so that was okay. I was going to stay there. As a first-year temporary profess, it was decided that the temporary profess would get a year of experience on mission out doing something, you know, not live at the mother house. I was sent to Sacred Heart Academy to replace a sister who was teaching sewing and home economics, not having a degree or anything in it, but I knew how to do those things. And so, and I was very active growing up in 4-H, where I learned a lot of things about sewing. So I had some skills and background, which the Mother Superior knew or understood, and so I was sent there, no background in teaching, no college degree in home economics or sewing or any of that, and taught, and everybody taught religion, so that was just a given. So I taught religion and home economics for a year. I found that that I like the one-on-one contact. When you're teaching sewing, you're working with an individual. I mean, you're working with a whole class, but there's a lot of individual contact with the students. And so I found that I really enjoyed that. However, when I came, was going back to college, I was going to finish my degree in math, and I was asked to instead to get a degree in home economics, because there was no home economics teachers. They all were older, and the high schools taught home economics. So I said, why not if I can also finish the math degree? But that sent me then to Spalding, because that's the only place that had a degree in offered a degree in home economics. So I finished college with a double major in math and home economics, and then was sent back to Sacred Heart to teach home economics and math and religion. So I taught all three. And it was a challenge, but one of the things that a phrase I often use and have been using a lot lately is, I feel God calls us to do what needs to be done. And sometimes it's not always what I think needs to be done, but it's what's presented to me that needs to be done. And so I've done a lot of things that I probably in ministry that I would not necessarily have chosen if not encouraged, prompted, or being told this is what I need to do. And that's been a very deep learning. Well, I taught for about 8 years, and then I went to graduate school. I went to graduate school in some of those summers, but then I went full-time for a year and finished a master's degree in theological studies. Ironically, when I finished the master's degree, I got a lifetime teaching certificate in home economics, which made no sense to me at all, but it meant that I had all the credentials. I didn't have to worry about going to school some more. So when I finished that degree, I was very much attracted to pastoral ministry, working in a parish. And I had done some inquiry and some interviewing with parishes, moving in that direction while the last semester in college. And I got called and asked to come talk to the president of the community, and was asked to become vocation director. And at this point in our history as a community, the decision on ministry was a joint decision between the leadership and the individual. So I would have never been simply told to do that. But I was shocked, surprised, and was not really interested in doing that. because I had pretty much had my heart set on working in a parish. And so I asked for some time to think about it and pray about it. And when I could still remember driving back to the University of Dayton after this visit, crying the whole way, saying, no. However, before I got back to Dayton, tears had dried up, and I found myself saying yes on my insides. That again, it was what I was invited to do, to be the vocation director for the community. And I was young, the vocation director has never been anybody as young as me. And I thought, what is it that somebody's seeing in me that I could do this. And but it presented with me a lot of opportunities and experiences that were really rich. So I was vocation director for about 6 years. However, while being vocation director, I also was in charge of the senior retreats at Sacred Heart, and which was not unusual to be doing 2 or 3 different ministries at the same time. I was also doing some work with the Archdiocese in teaching catechetical classes. Because I just finished a degree in theology, and there was still so much change and new going on in the church. I had the background for all the new theologies and things that were being taught. So I did a lot of both of those. But it was a rich experience. But after 6 years, I knew that I was ready. I was spent and was ready for something else. So then I finally got to a parish. With a dear pastor that in my experience with several priests, he's probably the model pastor that I knew. And a very good man who knew who he was and knew his limitations and knew how to surround himself with people who could do what he could not do or did not want to do. And I was one of those people. And so my time at St. Martha Parish was very rich. Father Bob Huber, he's now deceased, so I knew of him because I knew his sister rather well, but I really didn't know him. But he had heard about me because he recruited me for the job. So I didn't even know there was an opening there. But that was, and I also during that time also I did some of my first training as a spiritual director. And which I've used in a variety of different ways, but I am a certified spiritual director. But parish life put me in contact with multi-generational, multi-sex, because up to this time I was only with women through high school and college and Sacred Heart teaching. And so this was putting me in a situation that was a lot more variety and a lot of creativity. That's when I began to learn how creative I really was. And I realized that part of that, even the background is sewing, part of that was a creative outlet. Growing up, I sewed in order to have new clothes to wear. But what I learned teaching girls to sew, part of that was a creative activity. It wasn't so they could have more clothes, but it was creativity coming out. So I did a lot of creativity with planning prayer services and with our CIA and sacramental preparation and just general relating to people. I also was part of the beginnings while the community ministries were beginning to develop, and I was in on the beginning of Southeast Associated Ministries, which was an outreach program that St. Martha participated in, and I was the parish representative to that beginning ministry. So it was just a lot of opportunities for that. I was there for 9 years. Then I was recruited by the Archdiocese. A lot of different things going on that I, in the parish, with pastor change, associate pastor change, that I was beginning to think about something different when I was contacted, and I was hired to be the curriculum director for the lay ministry formation program, and which was a good experience. But one of the things I learned pretty quickly working for the Archdiocese was that I didn't want to work for the Archdiocese. And so I think we learn not only by the good experiences, we learn things about ourselves, But, initially I think I thought, oh, wow, this is a step up to work for the Archdiocese. And I thought, no, it was not. But the Archdiocese was also doing a lot of reorganization, and so I went from the lay ministry formation curriculum to be the director of adult faith formation for the Archdiocese, which was another position, not entirely distinct from lay ministry formation, but different. But it only confirmed in me that I'm going to look for a parish that wants somebody. So I was with the Archdiocese for 4 years, and I can still remember interviewing at St. Gabriel's, and one of the laymen on the committee said, why would anybody want to leave a position with the Archdiocese of Louisville, as prominent as that is, and come to this parish? And I said, why wouldn't anybody? So it was a good move. So I went to St. Gabriel, and I was there for 15 years. And was there through building of a new church that went from seating 200 or 300 and some to 1,200, and booming in the Fern Creek area. And so there was a lot of opportunity for being creative and doing, introducing new programs and doing things in a different way, and a pastor that was encouraging and accepting of that, a staff that was open to all kinds of new things. And so St. Gabriel became, at that time, the largest parish in the Archdiocese. So it was a big enterprise, and operated a lot on volunteers, and had a pastor that was very good at inviting volunteers, and I learned a lot from him how to do that also. I can still remember this one man, Ray, and he said to me, I think you have a PhD in arm twisting. He said, you could get anybody to do anything. And I laughed and I said, Ray, I can, but I said, it's because I see something good in them, and I want to make sure that they see it too. And he said, well, you're right, because he was, I'm not sure what he was doing at that time, but he said, I'd never do this unless you ask me to. And I said, well, some people want to do things and they just wait to be asked. So I always say, I don't hesitate asking anybody to do anything, and I have no problem taking a no if they feel like they can't do it or don't want to. Or if they're hesitant, I'll say, well, try it for a few months. My line is, I don't never expect anybody to volunteer for life. Try it out and see if it's a good match for you. But I never had trouble getting volunteers, because people say, well, you know what you want, what you need, and you know how to help somebody do what needs to be done, and so you make volunteering easy. You don't just get somebody to volunteer and then desert them. So it was just a good group of people, large group of people to work with, and at the same time I was doing that all the time. Almost all the time I was still doing some teaching for the Archdiocese for catechist certification, and it was like they needed somebody that was qualified to do it and do what needs to be done. But it had an ulterior motive, because it also then helped me get the teachers in St. Gabriel School certified as catechist also, because I was teaching some of the classes on site, so that worked well. So, but my heart was in the pastoral part of that, of relating to individuals, whether they were senior citizens or newly married or preschoolers. or everything in between. You know, there was just a wide range of opportunities. Some of the best times in ministry was welcoming people to church on Sunday and saying goodbye to them after Mass, because that's when I heard their stories and their questions and their concerns, and they could count on me being there. I was there before and after every Mass, 5 Masses a weekend, every weekend, and I loved it. Some of that was a building up of the sense of community. St. Gabriel's had a reputation of being very welcoming and helping to create community, getting people involved. And there were like communities within the community. I was responsible for the RCIA, the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults. And we had groups of, at times, 50 a year. And, you know, but people, they wanted to join the Catholic Church, but they also wanted to be part of this community of people that were learning together, were socializing together, were sharing their faith, sharing their stories, people that really listened to each other. And you know, listening is a big part of what I do. It's just listen, be there and listen, and hopefully communicating that you're heard, that I really hear what you're saying. I hear your pain, I hear your joy, I hear your questions, I hear your doubts. You know, I hear you. And that was a big, huge amount of my time in ministry. But in a pastoral associate in parish was somewhat of a new role, and it was defined differently by every parish just about. The pastor knew what he wanted somebody, needed help with, or wanted somebody to do. It was a new role. And so how it was defined varied. And so I can remember when I walked first to St. Martha's, you know, the community asked me for a job description to put in my files, what I was doing. And I go, well, so I asked the pastor, and he said, just say, do whatever the pastor needs. And I go, okay, a little more specific, you know. And he said, not really, because he said, this is an evolving role. You know, and that's the way I always looked at the role. So and then especially at St. Gabriel when I was there, we used to define it as that I'd do anything an associate pastor would do, except what I could not do because I wasn't ordained. And there were times when I wished I were ordained. I take that back. I did not wish I was ordained. I wish I was able to provide some of the ministries that ordained men did provide. And that's a big distinction for me, you know, that I really wish that I could baptize, or that I could hear confessions and absolve people with God's forgiveness and peace, you know, which I could not do. I had to refer them to somebody else to do that. But I was involved in every aspect of parish life, from, you know, finances to building plans, renovation plans on that business end, but also in every pastoral piece, from senior citizens to small children to, I developed a baptism preparation program that involved 3 meetings. And in doing that, I involved as part of the staff doing that were couples that had recently had a child baptized. So they came to it with experience, you know, and people say, why do I have to go to a class to get my child baptized? My parents didn't do that for me. And I said, I know, but you know, we're in a different place now. And I said, why don't you just come once and see what it's like? You know, and they found it such a bonding thing to be there with other young couples who just had a new child, and sharing with them about sleepless nights and you know, and not knowing how to be a parent and learning and you know, it was a great experience. And to be welcomed to this church community, not just a family affair, but a church affair. So it's just every aspect of every sacrament of parish life, and I was always willing to take on anything sometimes to the extent that, to my detriment, that I was taking on too much, because I was involved in a lot of things. Well, and somebody say, well, what are you going to do this summer now? You know, thinking school schedule, and nothing changes for me in the summer. You know, it's, you know, parish life goes on. When I was at Gabriel's, one of the things that we did is I moved baptisms to take place during a Sunday Mass. And you know, people say it's going to take longer. I got to be at church too long, and you know, and I don't know the family. What do I care? You know, but again, so much depends on the pastor. You know, Father Bill Hammer was, you know, baptized infants by immersion, and raise the child up and walk through church with it, even if it's screaming and crying. You know, and parishes, people would start clapping. You know, and it became a parish event, because we were welcoming this child into as a disciple of Jesus Christ in his faith community. And so it was much, much bigger than just parents and grandparents and other siblings if the child has, you know. And, you know, but it took more work and more planning, and had to make sure the water was warm, and big, fluffy, clean, white bath towels, and we never let the child come to church in their white baptismal garment. They came in a onesie or wrapped in a towel, because they didn't put on the white garment until they were baptized. The symbols and the rituals are so beautiful. You know, every experience gives you more experience. You know, and so one of the things with our CIA is the experience of other faith traditions that our CA candidates brought to the program that were rich, you know, and allowing them to share those experiences and to affirm them. You know, that's so important. And I often use the story to Emmaus, how Jesus used the real life examples of what the disciples experienced to teach them the next steps, you know. And it's like we got to build on our experiences, that, you know, and so that's that we learn from them, but we also, they open up other doors for us. That's one of the things that at St. Gabriel's, those 15 years, I got more and more involved in outreach, because I wanted to move the parish also, and to move away from any kind of navel gazing, or this thing, how good we are, because look how big we are and how our school's growing. But, you know, what about the people that are not part of this? And that's what I got more and more involved in outreach kinds of things with the community ministry there, also with refugees and immigrants. Homelessness, there's a lot of homelessness down by the Schneider Freeway, very close to St. Gabriel's. And so it's just, you know, there's a big homeless camp there. And so it's just that kind of involvement, that one experience leads to the openness to another experience and to another experience. And then to realize what I've missed along the way. Teaching the Sacred Heart was very insular compared to the experiences in the parish. You know, and so it was just a lot to be gained by that, for me personally. Almost every sister could, in some way, started out teaching in a classroom. That's who we saw ourselves. But we did respond to the needs of the time and what needed to be done. And it was, you know, startling at the Vatican II that we start reaching out to parish ministries. I think that we have had a great impact, especially in the Archdiocese of Louisville, with sisters, not just my community, but all communities, broadening the concept of service to people in parish life, and helping to build a community bigger than the school. You know, and in no way, I mean, I think schools are extremely valuable, and I don't want to downplay them at all. But if that's where we focus our energy, and, you know, I know from my own family experience, I can still remember at a diocesan meeting I was at, where one of the priests was talking about that we've got to keep our schools because that's where the future Catholics are. And I want to say, I have numerous nieces and nephews that went to Catholic grade school, high school, and college, and are not active in the church. And I said there's multiple reasons for that, but being in a Catholic school is not a guarantee of that. And so many of our children graduate from Catholic grade schools, and then they with their family graduates from the parish. So that's not the reason for keeping the schools. Is it helping to farm good people? Yes, it's doing good things, but it's not keeping the membership rolls up. I've talked a lot about what I've done in the 55 years, in terms of specific places that I've been assigned or chosen to work with. That's wonderful. However, it's who I am in those places that is much more important, and how I relate and how I connect. And that is what will be remembered, and will feed the next generation of how they become the good people they have the potential to become, to be the good people they were created to be. And if we think of that only in the confines of an institutional church, we're really limiting ourselves. And I think it's much bigger than that. And so for people to know or remember Sister Ruth Ann when she taught them a Sacred Heart, or helped them with the baptism of their child of St. Martha's, or whatever, that's fine and it feels good, but it's not what I'm about. I want to be the person that can be seen as somehow being the light of Christ in others' lives. And I choose to do that because I want to follow the Jesus in the gospel that I've come to know well and love and cherish, and have a lot to learn yet. And all the outreach things that I was involved with, has carried over because I left St. Gabriel's when I was elected to leadership. And there was another whole different set of challenges in another ministry. And when the term was over with, I felt very open-ended where to next. And somehow God led me to this outreach program that was initially called Francis Center, and which was a new model of parish, which got me really excited about some of the dreams I had about what a parish could be, but it never materialized, and that was disheartening. But the other good things have come from that, the kind of relationships that I've developed, and we finished the Kids Cafe program for the year, and I had an appreciation. It's a very simple meal for volunteers, for the adult volunteers, and had 38 of them come. And I was just overwhelmed with the kind of affirmation that was spoken about this program and what we did for these kids, and with the exception of one, they all said they'll come back next year. It is a program sponsored by the Dare to Care, which is a food pantry for the city of Louisville, and it provides meals for Dare to Care provides meals for children and seniors. So they provide a meal, and part of the requirement is there be an hour of activity prior to the meal. And but for the very beginning, we wanted to do educational and enrichment activities, because we believe that good nutrition and good education makes for good children. And so they come 3 days a week. They have an hour of tutoring, homework help, or enrichment, or whatever they need. And then they have a hot meal provided by Dare to Care. And it takes about 25 volunteers per day to do this. That's stretching it pretty thin. I have a lot of youth volunteers, and this is the part of the gifts of the program, because the youth volunteers, some of them come and just fall right in and are very good, and some come and in order to check off their service requirements and cause more work for me than they provide. But it's an experience provided for them that they learn something from too. So it's a good thing. So it's like, again, that multi-generational. Ideally, I would love to have more volunteers so that children could get more individual attention. But now most of the tutors that work with the children have 2 or 3 students to work with. And I would love to have 1 or 2, and especially when you identify that some child really needs a lot of one-on-one. But I don't always have the capacity for that. But the other thing with the program, besides the opportunity for the youth, the senior citizens that volunteer that love having something to do. One woman left the appreciation meal and said, you know, I'm coming all 3 days. And she said, I am so grateful that it gets me out of bed in the morning. You know, and she's 88 years old. And she's wonderful. But you know, it's a safe place for the children to be 3 days a week. It gives them something to look forward to. They're learning. They know that there's somebody there that cares about them, and it's a sense of security. And you know, gradually through the year, you learn about the family of many of these children, and you think, we don't really know what they go home to. There's one mom that picks up her 3rd grade daughter, and she always has something nasty to say to this daughter every time she picks her up. You know, and so we kind of gave this routine thing. Oh, Addison did really well today. She was so good at her spelling words. You know, about time. You know, and so he's like, you know, trying to give them something positive. You know, and it also, you know, like, it's one of the volunteers said, "Can I bring cupcakes for the last day?" You know, or I also, you know, manage this mobile food pantry once a month, and one of the volunteers there said, I'd love to work at Kids Cafe, but I can't do it. But a friend of mine said, we'd like to make a financial contribution so you can do something special for the kids. And so, I mean, it's just like by word of mouth, things just happen. It's an opportunity for service and volunteering for seniors, for high schoolers, for parish involvement to see what's going on. You know, somebody that John Paul Price said, you know, we drove by the other day and there was a whole line of cars, and I said, so we figured out that they were picking up kids from that Kids Cafe program. You know, what goes on there? You know, so it has, you know, the visual kind of things that people notice. You know, so it's another one of those things that I kind of fell into. You know, that I didn't seek it out, but it fits. You know, because when I was first asked to do it, I thought, not me. You know, but it was another one of those things. It needed to be done. You know, the group had decided they wanted to do a Kids Cafe program. They had passed the requirements, you know, of being, you have to be in an area where the closest public school has at least 50% of their children on free and reduced lunches. Well, that's not hard to meet at all. You know, with Klondike and Goldsmith Elementary, they both have up in the 80%. So, you know, anyway, so all those things were in place, but they didn't have anybody to organize it and manage it. It was at Barnabas, it was at Beecher Park Baptist, and now it's at John Paul. In a general kind of way, I think any experience we have is an opportunity for growth. You know, opportunity for growth in your own self-knowledge, growth in developing skills, growth in your relationship with God. You know, I've done things that I never thought I would ever do, but I believe that God has inspired me, nudged me, pushed me, and then I've done it. You know, and that I'm not reticent, even though early on in my life I was, but I'm not reticent at taking on a new challenge, you know, or a new opportunity if I think that I can do it. And the greater challenge is to quit saying yes to everything. And, you know, just yesterday my brother was saying to me when I was with his family for Mother's Day, and he was saying, when are you going to realize how old you are? You know, and I said, well, my body is beginning to tell me that, but I said, as long as I can, I will. he's experiencing some health issues too, and his body's telling me, he said, when are you going to, after all, you're older than I am. I think I probably one of the deepest things is realizing in a very intimate, deep way, I cannot do this alone. That I'm walking with God with this. I'm walking with my friend Jesus with whatever I do. I can't do it alone. And I can't, and things like I can't beat myself up when something doesn't go the way I want it to. That, that it's okay to be imperfect. But, that I think also my life has been blessed and privileged to have the opportunities to be and do. It's a privilege and it's a blessing. The charism is, in some ways, is just another wording for following Jesus as a disciple of Jesus Christ in the gospel. So it's given some words to articulate it, but I think from the very beginning I was drawn, called to religious life because of that contemplative love. And the contemplative love can't just sit inside and ruminate over it. You've got to do something with it. And that's that openness and eagerness to serve the needs of others. And it's only, for half, it's only been the second half of my religious life that we've even named a charism or called it that. So it was there long before that. And so giving it a name and articulating some lovely words around it is nice, but it's not that important to me.